President Trump taking his crime crackdown to Illinois. DHS launching a new operation called Midway Blitz to target criminal illegal migrants across the state. But Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson still defiant, writing in a New York Times op-ed, the National Guard isn't what we need. Meanwhile, North Carolina Governor Josh Stein is calling for more police in the state as the FBI is investigating the killing of 23-year-old Ukrainian refugee Irina Zarutska. Career criminal DeCarlos Brown was seen on camera slashing her neck after she boarded a public train last month. White House Deputy Press Secretary Abigail Jackson replied to the North Carolina governor saying this: "He was arrested 14 times. The police did their jobs. You did not, and shame on you for trying to shift the blame." Joining me now is Virginia Congressman Ben Cline. Congressman, this story once again shows a blue city and, basically laws in the books that do not keep violent criminals where they belong, which is in jail. Many say that she escapes Ukraine to come here and she's murdered, and that it was the governor himself that failed her.
It is one of the most tragic stories I've heard, where a woman escapes war, comes to the land of opportunity, and is murdered in a Democrat-run city because of soft-on-crime policies. There is a crime crisis in our Democrat-run cities. President Trump recognizes that. He wants to address that. Congress recognizes that. The Judiciary Committee under Jim Jordan's leadership, on which I serve, wants to address that with a comprehensive crime bill. But in the meantime, we do need to address this crime crisis, and I think Trump is on the right track by talking about ways to do that.
What do you make about what we're seeing in Chicago right now?
I mean, Chicago it's one of the murder capitals of the country. And I think a lot of people have become just immune to the headlines day after day. Poor, just individuals being murdered on the streets of Chicago, and nobody taking action. And so President Trump wants to take action. I support President Trump's efforts to bring peace to the streets of Chicago, and I think the people of Chicago will as well.
You support the National Guard in Chicago?
I think that there is a crime crisis in our cities. The National Guard can be used in times of crisis like this. It was used in L.A. During immigration efforts to address immigration in L.A. He's addressing immigration in Chicago right now, and the crime crisis makes it difficult for ICE to work. And so sending in the National Guard as support is a reasonable act.
Okay. I want to ask you about the business at hand in Washington, because Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer is signaling bipartisan talks still have a long way to go to prevent a government shutdown. There's only 9 legislative days left to do this. Watch.
Republicans can continue to go at it alone. They can continue to bow down to Donald Trump. They can continue to surrender Congress's constitutional powers over the executive and enable Donald Trump and his evil minion, Russell Vought, as they illegally cancel and steal congressional-approved funding. And we Democrats will not accept that. We won't bail Republicans out as the cost of health care, groceries, school supplies, rent, electricity, automobiles all go up and up and up. We Democrats don't want to see a government shutdown. But avoiding one means Republicans have to show they are serious about having real, substantive, serious negotiation.
Congressman, you're a member of the House Appropriations Committee. On the House side, Fox News is reporting that people like Ryan Zinke are frustrated because they don't want their detailed budget work to just get blanketed over by this just clean CR. But that seems to be the only option on the table at this point to avoid a shutdown.
We're all very frustrated with the Democrats' delay in the Senate. Chuck Schumer continues under Trump derangement syndrome to really drive us toward a shutdown. The House has passed appropriations bills. We passed the energy and water appropriations bill last week. We've got the labor, health and human services and education bill up in appropriations today. And we're going to spend hours and hours debating these bills. We want them to pass. And so we'd like there to be an agreement. Democrats are putting on additional requirements onto any agreement that would undo a lot of the Trump agenda. That's unacceptable. And so if they're driving us toward a shutdown, it's going to be on them when the government shuts down. And at that point, the Trump administration does have a lot more ability to maneuver in what operates and what doesn't. So it might come back to bite Chuck Schumer if he forces us over the cliff into a shutdown.
Yes, and that point has been made repeatedly, that the political cost of being the party that causes a shutdown are just too great, and obviously the Democrats know that. But the other thing is the White House is pushing for a one-year CR. But is that possible, do you think? I mean, you're on House budget.
Sure, we're operating under a one-year CR right now, and so it's possible. But that does take off the table all of the work that Appropriations is doing and making sure that we prioritize the Trump agenda, making sure that we remove a lot of the woke and weaponized government spending from the budget, and we continue to emphasize Trump's priorities like border security, addressing crime in our cities, and so we do want to get these appropriations measures finished. Okay,
so speaking of the House Budget Committee, there are these early discussions on a second Republican mega bill. Two sources are telling Fox News that the committee, your committee, is mapping out further reforms to Medicaid. That would include revisiting and then modifying measures that did not make the Senate's final version of this bill. Congressman, we know that that's a hot button issue politically. Where are we with that right now? What can you tell us?
Well, we're in a conversation stage right now. The chairman of the Budget Committee, Jody Arrington, is doing a great job of moving the ball forward. He got the first reconciliation bill across the finish line, and we would like to do more because there is more to be done, quite frankly. And so continuing to look at Medicaid reforms while protecting Social Security, while protecting Medicare for seniors, these are important priorities that we want to accomplish. And while we have the House and the Senate and the White House, we want to make sure that we achieve as much as possible for the American people.
Because of the midterms next year, and that's a whole nother discussion. And if we have more time, I'd bring that up. Congressman Ben Cline, it's always great to see you, sir. Thank you for being here.
Thanks, Cheryl.
All right.